At Rubber Band, we empower each other through positivity, kindness, and practical advice. Join a community of thousands of peers who understand the unique challenges you face. Rubber Band. Company agnostic, low ego, high empathy, always supportive.
Think you know Video My Job? Think again. We're no longer just a simple mobile app for video job ads. Think of us as a library of employee story videos embedded on your career site. Kind of like your very own YouTube, except you own the platform and not the marketing team. With Video My Job, you have a suite of enterprise-grade tools to plan video campaigns, send filming links, stay on message with AI scripts, and automatically brand your content. Want to know how we're helping talent teams like Deloitte create and publish 102 fully branded employee videos in just 4 days with zero editing required? Book a demo with Gav at videomyjob.com.
Welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Rubber Band podcast, where I am joined by special guest, Stephanie Zuniga-Maher. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work on, the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I would like to extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank
How
you.
doing?
It's so good to be here. I'm so excited. I've been a longtime Facebook group member, but first caller, obviously.
Oh, fabulous. Oh, fabulous. I can't wait to hear all about your career and all about your journey. Now, can I call you Steph? I've just got this.
Yeah,
Steph,
go on.
Steph, I just
Very much
try to cash it up a little bit, but only if you're happy with that.
Yeah, no worries.
Excellent. I mean, it's been very crazy this weekend in Victoria with all the winds and all the cold, and I feel like I'm in the middle of a hurricane. That's how it feels, right? How are you doing?
I'm good. Look, it's crazy weather up here, but at least it's warm. So that's the good thing about Sydney, is that we get the heat, but still the crazy. And Sydney's just crazy anyway. So
Sydney's beautiful. Whereabouts in Sydney are you?
I am near the airport, in Botany, which is just kind of in southeast Sydney. So not over any bridges or under any tunnels, just on the edge.
Excellent. And very handy when you travel, right?
Very handy. I don't get to travel nearly often enough, not enough holidays booked, but it's only a few minutes from the airport. So it's pretty good.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Steph, as I said, I'm so excited to hear about your journey. And I always think the best place to start is to go back to childhood and hear about young Steph and growing up and family and all those things. So tell me about you.
So I am originally from Washington, D.C., which being American is very different from being from Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. is very unique. It's not a state. It's kind of this big melting pot of lots of people from all over the place. So my dad was actually born in Belize, which is a country in Central America. And he came to the U.S. and met my mom in New York City. And then they moved to Washington in the 70s to actually work on the Jimmy Carter's presidential campaign. So
oh, wow.
Yeah. So my mom actually tells the story that I was nearly born in the White House. So she was working in the Carter White House when she was pregnant, and she was meant to have lunch, like literally in the White House on the day that I was born. But I was born at 8:17 in the morning. And so she had to call and say, actually, I can't come to lunch today because I'm in the hospital. I have the baby. And her favorite story is that all the Secret Service men who would gladly take a bullet for the president, no fear, nothing. They were terrified of her. Waddling around at 9 months pregnant, they were like, please go home. We do not this baby. We'll die for the country, but please just go home and have the baby.
Fair enough, right? I think that's a fair call.
I think that's a fair call too, but clearly my mother did not. And so she worked up until the day that I was born. And that's kind of very much about her. She's very much a feminist, raised me to be a feminist. I wasn't allowed to have a Barbie doll until Barbie had a job. So my Barbie doll was the one. And it's really cool to see, oh God, what's her name? I've just gone complete Margot Robbie dressed like her at one of the premieres. It was the Date Night Barbie that had the business suit, and then you took off the jacket, and it was like an evening gown or like an evening dress, a cocktail dress. So I had like the data night Barbie, the home office play set. So like I was like, yeah, this is going to be my life when I grow up. And of course, many years later, when I was working in recruitment up in Sydney, I used to go to the establishment, as many Sydney people would know. And I would have like the jacket on during the day and like take off the jacket, go to the establishment at night with my little like going out top and skirt. So I was very much data night Barbie.
That's so funny. I love it. Have you been to? You mentioned your dad was from Berlin. It's my one of my friends, Chantel. She's from there, and she does travel there quite regularly and shares her Insta photos, and it looks beautiful. It looks stunning.
It is absolutely one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It's tiny. So, of course, I went, last time I was actually on my honeymoon. And so, of course, I paid with a credit card. And they're like, oh, Zuniga, your aunt was my teacher. I'm like,
oh, that's so funny.
I mean, it's just this really like lovely, welcoming, beautiful place. I highly encourage you, if you're ever near Central America, stop into Belize. It's beautiful.
Oh, I really, really want to. It's like I have this envy. I look at it and I just think it just looks like this beautiful paradise with gorgeous water and just rich culture, and the food looks amazing. Like let's talk food, right? Like take me there.
We went there on our honeymoon, and I had lobster 3 times a day. It was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, did you do your schooling in Washington? Did you do high school? And
yes. So I grew up in Washington, D.C. Lived there until I went to university down in North Carolina. So did high school in Washington, went to Duke University in North Carolina, and my junior year at Duke, or my sophomore year at Duke, my second year for those people who aren't fluent in like American schooling, but my second year of university, all of my friends were talking about going abroad. All of my friends were talking about like, study abroad. And I'm like, oh no, I think I just want to stay here. And then 3 of my best friends were like, well, we're going to Spain. The guy that I was dating was going to London. So I'm like, well, if I stay here, what's happening here? Let me figure out where to go. So I actually went to London for a year and studied at University College of London. While I was there, I met this lovely Aussie guy who, lovely, down-to-earth Aussie bloke, as so many Aussie blokes are. Don't tell my husbands I'm now married to an Irish guy, but that's a different story. But went back to Duke. September 11th happened, which is kind of showing how old I am. But September 11th, the lovely Aussie guy couldn't get a visa into the US because all of that really like shut down. And it was just a crazy time, if anyone else is old enough to remember that time. And so I was like, right, Mom and Dad, I have a plan. I'm going to go to Australia. And they're like, no, you're not. I'm like, yes, I am. And so they're like, what are you going to do there? I'm like, I don't know yet. So they're like, figure out what to do, and then maybe you can go for a year. So I put my little thinking hat on, applied to graduate school here, wound up going to the University of Sydney, did a master's in international business and marketing, moved to Australia, hung out with the guy, broke up with the guy. And actually, that's how my journey in recruitment started, because I was on a student visa and I was looking for a job. So I wandered into Manpower Australia, which is now Experis, but they used to have an office 34 Hunter Street, I think, which is now a hotel. Wandered in there with my little resume in hand. Do you have any jobs? And they said, well, do you want to be a receptionist? I said, yeah, sure, why not? Part-time, 20 hours a week, whatever. And so they're like, well, you can be a receptionist here. And so I worked in their Sydney CBD reception and kind of, got involved in some data entries. At the time, people were still like faxing in resumes most of the time. And that's in the old days. And then started working in their marketing team and was marketing coordinator for them for Australia and New Zealand on the corporate side, and literally realized that all the recruiters were making about 3 times as much money as I was. And they were having way more fun. So I'm like, I think I could do this. And so went, started applying for jobs in the recruitment sector, and applied for a job with Talent International, which at the time was this teeny tiny, like when I say teeny tiny, I mean it was a serviced office on, God, what street was that on? Oh, it was in Sydney CBD, but serviced office. There were 6 of us in the company. Amanda, Katrina, Richard, Laura, and Phil Hack as well, all sitting in this office. And because I'd worked for IBM for the year in between university and moving to Australia, Richard Earl, who's the talent founder, said, "Oh, you must know a bit about IT." I said, "Sure, why not? I know what a server is." Why not? Literally my first job in recruitment, like proper recruitment as a resourcer, was at Talent International. I was there for 7 years.
Oh, that is amazing, and I'm a big fan of talent. I love Mark, the CEO. I think he's
amazing. Guy. Yes,
he is really amazing, and I've been to events with him and met him a number of times, and I've got some, over the years, some friends that work there as well, and it seems to be just an amazing culture. But so you kind of a little bit different for you. I mean, and I love that. You were just sort of following the travel bug and, walking into Manpower with your CV just to get some work and, working within a recruitment agency, firstly on reception, and the receptionist is always a recruitment agency, consultant's best friend, right? Like you're the eyes and the ears, what goes on in the waiting room, it's gold, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of were able to witness what was going on and what a day in the life of a recruiter could be. And you could see that, they were quite successful and making money and thought, hey, I'll throw my hat in the ring.
Yeah.
Where was the moment where you thought, do you know what, I actually think I can make a career out of this?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I think originally it was like, right, I just want to work. I want to live in Australia. And then it was probably maybe a year or two into the role at Talent, where I'm like, I actually really enjoy this. And I had the absolute pleasure of being mentored by Amanda Capel, who I still call mom to this day. And she knew everything. She knew everything about New South Wales government recruitment, knew everyone as well. And it's like, she was just such a mentor, sponsor, someone who taught me so much. That was like, wow, like I really think I could do this. And yeah, I think it was when I started growing my contractor desk.
Yeah.
That was really the moment where it's like, oh, I can do this. Like, this is something I can make a life here. And so I think that was probably the moment where it's like, this is fun.
Yeah.
I'm good at it, and I'm getting paid well. Why wouldn't I do this?
Exactly, right. And it's really interesting, like when you were kind of observing in marketing and also reception in the previous role and seeing how recruiters work and what the industry is all about, once you hit the tools and became a consultant yourself, did the reality of the industry meet your expectations, or were there some surprises?
Look, you're asking me to think back a long time ago now. So
as far as me, I think it's a pretty similar time. But anyway,
let's go all the way back. Flip the calendar back. I think it was a couple of things. Like, number one, being on reception at Manpower. Like, I was young, like 22-ish, 23. And the women seemed so glamorous. Like they were, wearing, like they just seemed so, like they had everything together. And I think sometimes when you're looking up at people and like when you look up to people, you're, wow, that's amazing. Like they have it together. And then when you are that person, you never quite feel like you have it together in the same way. Like even now, people are like, oh, wow, you have this, you have that. I'm like, I still don't know what I'm doing most days, but don't tell anyone.
We're all of us have imposter syndrome, right? I don't know why. It's a recruitment industry thing.
It's just a thing. It's like you always are waiting to really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But like everyone else looking at you is like, oh yeah, she's, they have it together. They know what they're doing. They're really successful. And I'm like, I don't know what I don't know. So did it actually meet my expectations? I don't know. I think from professionally, yes. I definitely think I can point to moments of success and say, yep, that's what success looks like. And I was very successful in that role. But did I ever really feel like I was that glamorous, like amazing, polished, perfect, like, oh, wow, this is me? No, I never felt that way.
Me neither. I get it, right? But there's a beauty in that, I think. Like,
it's it's the journey of like really understanding yourself and like becoming who you are and never actually saying, yep, I'm done. I'm a finished product. I am the beautiful swan, like always feeling a little bit like that ugly duckling that has a little bit of work to do. And just a
Yeah.
few things that you can like, oh, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that, just to get that like 1% better. And I think that's always a really important goal, to just get to like next 1%, like that next little bit that you can do.
And having that creative approach to your career as well, when you're in that environment where you're constantly striving for something else, right? And then you can experiment a little bit more rather than following, a traditional linear pathway and trying to be like someone else, right?
Exactly. And I think, what I kind of discovered probably a little bit too late is that I didn't have a career plan. I was
Yeah.
just really happy working at Talent. And then another opportunity came up and it was like, oh, okay, let's try that. It's like, oh, I'm not quite as happy as that. I'll go back to that. So I didn't have, and I kind of compare myself now to some of the people who I'm working with at Canva who like seem like they were born with a career plan. It was
Mm.
like they probably finished the HSC and it feels like they knew what they were doing from day one. I did not have that same clarity at the time. I was like, stay in Australia, make money, stay in Australia, make more money, have
Yeah.
fun. Like,
Yeah.
that's my plan. And so it's all worked out, but it
Mm.
wasn't that like really well drawn out ladder where I was going to be amazing at this by 35 and by 40 do this and by it was not that planned.
No, I've had no plan. I just fall, sorry for the language, but ask backwards into each role that I seem to take. And I'm like, how did I get here? What am I doing?
Oh,
I love that.
yeah, it's like, oh great, oh good. Yes, that was my plan. That was not my plan.
No. Well, speaking of that, like, because I'm really interested in hearing about that career path, right? And particularly with one that wasn't planned. So from talent, where did you go? Like, talk me through from talent to Canva.
Ooh, yeah, okay. So from talent, I went to Cubic Resources,
Right.
which was not as fun as talent. So then I went back to talent and did a marketing contract with them, and kind of thought, ooh, maybe I want to be in marketing again because that was what my master's was in, and again in a really good sense of like, oh, maybe I'll do this. And then decided, no, that contract probably wasn't really what I want to do long term.
Yeah.
Then went to Clarius, which is now, I feel like a different company, but possibly not. And then went to People Bank. And I was
Oh,
at
cool.
People Bank for a few years, for 4 or 5 years. I can't remember. Like all the dates kind of run together. But when I was at People Bank, that was one of those moments where I kind of had a light bulb, I think. I say I think with all the certainty. I had a light bulb moment, I think. Um, but really at People Bank, I had the opportunity to be in like a leadership training program. And part of the training was to organize like an event or to, have a project. And my project was organizing a women leading tech
Oh,
event.
great. Great.
And so finally, for like the first time, I was like, oh, like that feminist, like women's studies degree that I did back there, all of that is really coming up in like my IT recruitment career. And it's something that I could like really be passionate about because what I've found as, working in the IT recruitment industry, I really did have that moment where it's like, I am recruiting for a client and there's one woman as a
Mm,
hiring, like one in the
mm.
whole in all of my contacts. Like there's the two women in HR were obviously women, and then like the one hiring manager. I'm like, this is weird. Like this is very not normal. And so it was like through having that kind of aha moment, then women leading tech. And then I realized, you know what, I actually want to work in DEI. Like this is what I'm passionate about. Like why am I doing IT recruitment instead of
Right.
what I'm really passionate about? So it really was a moment where like I uncovered my passion. And part of that was actually coming back from maternity leave as well. People Bank, they were so lovely. When I went off on that leave, they gave me a copy of Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg,
Right.
which at 9 months pregnant, I was not about to read Lean In. I was like, I am about to have this major life-changing thing come out of me. Like nothing cannot work. But it literally sat on my nightstand for about 10 months, I would say. And finally I started reading it and was having this like moment where it's like, oh my God, it really resonated with me all of a sudden.
Mm.
And so then being able to go back after mat leave, organize the event, it all kind of came together into this like, yep, my next step's going to be DEI. I don't know how I'm going to get there exactly, but like first thing I need to do is get out of agency recruitment. Like that was like, okay, I know what I need to do first. And after that, went to Splunk, and I worked with the lovely Martha Creedon and the
Oh,
amazing
I love
Corey.
that.
Both of
Yeah.
whom are wonderful humans, and Natasha as well, if she's listening. So, had a really great experience there. And then, and just learned so much from Go and Martha, and just had the best time. And then was like just kind of thinking about my next opportunity. Was on LinkedIn, as sometimes you are when you're a little bit bored. And this job came up at Canva, inclusive recruiting partner. And I was like, inclusive recruiting partner. I'm like, what could that be? And it was like a mixture of DEI and TA. And I was like, yep, that's it. Sign me up. So applied for the role, got the role. After about a year at Canva in that role, they're like, okay, we're actually going to create a DEI team. It's like, oh, cool. That's amazing. And so myself and Julie, who are the two inclusive recruiting partners, along with two people partners, we're now on the DEI team at Canva, and we are everything DEI at Canva.
Fantastic.
So that's how I got here, where I am now.
Which is amazing. And I can see so much in terms of your career and so much that you learned along the way to have found that specialization that you're so passionate about, right? Like it actually, we're talking about, career pathways that aren't linear or don't make any sense, and they're creative and experimenting. But then when you reflect back on it, it kind of does make sense.
Look, it all comes together. Like when you look at the big picture, like I never, ever, ever 10 years ago would have been like, this is where I'm going to wind up. But it makes sense now that I'm here, and I kind of look back at different things along the way. And I'm like, oh yeah, I had to do IT recruitment, so I understood the tech industry, so that now at Canva, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that now. Like I understand the challenges that our engineering teams are facing. And like when they say that we don't have enough women in our pipeline, it's like, oh yeah, well, I get that because I was on the tools, and no, we didn't have, that big pool of candidates that we wanted. And so it is really holistically looking back a story. But like, if you were to ask me, what's my 5-year plan? I don't know. Like, I still don't know.
Me
Like,
neither. That's fine. Right. Like,
until something else comes up that's interesting, or I win the lottery, or who knows.
So, for anyone out there that's listening that perhaps is working as a recruitment consultant, be it in agency or internal, that is curious about diversity, inclusion, and equity, and becoming a specialist like yourself, what is a day in the life for you at Canva? Like, what sort of things do you work on? What does it mean exactly for people that are curious about their career?
What does it mean? Look,
Yeah.
that is the $64 million question, because I think there are so many areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and so many different paths that you can go down. If you wanted to stay within that kind of TA hiring recruitment space, you can look at how to widen your talent pipeline. You can look at ways to make your recruitment processes more equitable and fair, and to look at learning more about bias, to work out how to de-bias hiring decisions. I mean, there's that whole section. Then you can think about all the different, I guess, diversity, people can't see this, but diversity groups that you could potentially be either aligned to or specialize in. And if you wanted to, you could spend your entire career working on disability inclusion and look at ways to make workplaces more friendly for people with disabilities. You could look at gender, you could look at race, you could look at culture, you could look at the LGBTQIA plus community. I mean, like, there's so many different areas of diversity that it is amazing to work in, but it's also really challenging, because it's like, who do you help first? As a company, it's like, okay, everyone's drowning, and everyone's drowning at different speeds. So what do we tackle first? Do we say, right, women are 50% or 51% of the workforce, let's tackle women? Great, but hang on, what kind of woman are we talking about? Are we talking about a mother? Are we talking about an older woman, a younger woman? Like, women aren't monolithic, and none of these groups are monolithic. So trying to work out, like, how do you start is probably the hardest thing. And so I think the great thing about my day is no two days are really exactly the same. There's always something that bubbles up. I do a lot of work with our employee resource groups, which we call collectives, which we've just launched in the last 12 months. And so part of my role is looking at like picking collective partners and making sure that they have a strategy, making sure their strategy aligns with our global strategy, making sure that, whatever activities they want to do are resourced, funded, and how do they pick? It's like, okay, well, here's, let's say $20,000. What do you want to do this year? And all of a sudden it's like, they want to do 15 different things. And it's like, well, hang on, prioritize. Like, what do you really want to do? It's like,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kind of talking to the business, listening to people within the business, working out like what is the priority. But it can be like having 10 drowning children, and who do you say first? But I think if anyone's thinking about a career in DEI and is really truly interested, start looking at how you can make your own desk more equitable and inclusive. Start thinking about where you find your talent. When you do a database search, are you actually, looking at all of the candidates, or are you just like right here, the first 10 I called? Let's see, because we all know what it's like when you're busy. It's like, I'll just take the top 3 who respond, or are you actually looking to understand who they are, what they bring to the table? When you call someone, or when you have a Zoom conference, are you making sure that your captions are turned on? Because again, not everyone's disability is visible. So there are a lot of people who we can make the recruitment process more inclusive for without really knowing, just by small tweaks. So it always comes down to like these little tiny changes and behaviors that can really help your desk and help be more inclusive.
I think it's awesome advice, Steph, because, a lot of people that I speak to, it becomes quite overwhelming for them and they're not sure where to start, and therefore they don't do anything. Yeah. But it's okay just to make a small edit and then make another edit and another edit, and you just continue on that journey, and you're not always going to get it right, but it's just take that chance and try to do something.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the thing is that people are so worried about getting it wrong. And I understand, because it can be terrifying. Nobody wants to be the person that says the wrong thing, does the wrong thing, winds up offending someone. However, you have to, again, just do something, like put your pronouns in your name. Ask if someone needs, extra time for an interview. Ask someone, do you need any interview adjustments or accommodations? One of the first things that we did at Canva, Julie and I, is we implemented a process. And again, it's just a couple of lines at the bottom of an email. Please let us know if you need any adjustments to your interview process. And that could be a range of different things, but it's just leaving the door open that little bit. So the candidate, actually, do you know what? It would be really helpful if I had 20 extra minutes, or had the questions in advance, or can you make sure that the interviewer types out the questions, because I process information better when I see it written rather than when I hear it. So again, it's like the little tiny things that everyone can do
that have a massive impact on some people, right? Like it's a tiny thing you can do that will make such a huge difference to someone else. And that's where the power is, right?
Exactly.
What have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned over the years? Where do we start?
Where do we start? Oh my goodness. I would probably say, and maybe it's not a lesson, but the best piece of advice, and I remember this to this day, and it's something Amanda Capel told me, probably in our very first or second interview, I think. And she said, Steph, the job of a recruiter never changes. And I said, what do you mean? Like, she's like, the clients might be bigger, you might be working on more roles, the roles might be more senior, but the actual job itself doesn't change. And I think really understanding that, and you can get really good at the role, but at the end of the day, the job itself, that's the job. Like, that's it. And I think that was really, really good advice, that as I thought about my career in recruitment, and as I kind of moved through different roles, like, it's different. It might be a different type of, company. It might be a different sector. It might be a different job. But like, at the end of the day, you're still providing that match and that fit and that consultation for the client, and that consultation for the candidate as well. Like, that part isn't different. So I think that was a really good piece of advice. I think the other thing that I learned a little bit the hard way, and again, this is like back from my very early days in recruitment, was not to assume, and not to assume that when a client gives you a job description, that they actually know what they're talking about. because and again, this is like one of those moments where it's like, oh God, Steph, you're an idiot. but I remember interviewing this candidate, and this is back in the days of C#. I don't even know if C# is still around as a language. Probably no one uses it, but C#. And I remember sitting there, and of course, I was probably 6 or 7 months into my recruitment career. I'm finally allowed to like interview people on my own. I'm like, yeah, I know what's going on. And I'm sitting there with this guy, and I'm like, I'm really sorry. We need 5 to 7 years of C# development. You only have like 3. I just don't think it's going to be a fit. And the guy's like, oh, okay. Are they looking for someone who worked at Microsoft? And I'm like, oh, let me go through my little JD and I'm like, no, it doesn't say anything about Microsoft, but it does say 5 to 7 years of C# development. So I'm really sorry. The guy goes, if you want someone with that much experience with C#, they would have had to work at Microsoft. I'm like, oh, I'm like, oh. He's like, yeah, because C#'s only been around for about 3 years. And I was like one of the first people to start. Everyone else was developing it at Microsoft. And I was like, okay. And I felt about that big. But it was like that moment where it's like, okay, don't assume that just because it's written on paper to take that as gospel. Go off and do your own research. Talk to the candidates. Ask the candidates. They're the experts on themselves and they're the experts on technology. So it's okay to ask questions. And it's okay to preface this with like, I'm not a technical person. However, can you please explain to me X, Y, and Z? And people love that. People love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about what they're interested in. And you'll learn more from asking questions than you will from making assumptions. So that was like one of those moments I wanted to crawl into a hole and die, but it taught me so much.
Oh, I've been there. I've been there. Like, and I feel, like in my previous role with Flybys, it was learning around data and analytics that I had no idea about. So I was, I was making those kind of assumptions. And then in my most recent role here at REA as well, which is a tech company like Canva, right? I don't know half of the bloody jargon that goes on. You just ask the question. And I always, like you, like I think, do I like to talk about my work? Yes. So will a hiring manager like to talk about their work? Yes.
100%.
Right? So ask the questions.
You're not quiet about it. Once you ask the question, you're like, I don't really need to know all this detail, but okay.
Yeah. I know, but you build relationships that way too, and you get to know each other, and that's their passion. I mean, we all have our passion, whether it's diversity, inclusion, and equity, whether it's talent acquisition, whatever it might be, right? And we like to talk about it, just like we have today.
So that was a really good. So that's like my lesson. That's my advice. Like, ask people that they will talk your ear off about the things that they love. Yeah,
excellent. I'm just going to ask you one last question. I feel like I could talk to you for an hour. We should have done an extended episode. We're running out of time. I might just position this one. Like, what advice would you give to anyone out there that might be considering a career in recruitment? So someone just like yourself, maybe that's traveling, that's middle nice Aussie guy and arrived in Sydney. What would you say?
Look, I would probably combine it with 2 pieces of advice. One, I would repeat the advice that Amanda gave me. The job doesn't change. So if you love it, great. If you don't like it, well, the job doesn't change. And also I would probably say, make sure that whoever you choose to work for in recruitment, that you really do align with their values and that you align with, like, you actually want to work for them rather than, oh, it's just a job. Oh, I can do it for anyone. So I think people who go into recruitment and don't enjoy it, it's not like, sometimes it is the job that they don't enjoy, but sometimes it's actually the people that they're around and the company that they're around. When I think of jobs in recruitment that I haven't enjoyed, it's not the job. It's the people around me. And when I think about companies like Talent, which were phenomenal, and People Bank, which were fantastic, it was because the values of the company matched my own values. So I think, especially if you're fresh off the plane from wherever with your working holiday visa in hand, everyone's like, so many people are looking for recruiters, but just make sure that where you land is somewhere that you want to be.
That's perfect advice. Thank you. Steph, this was so fun. Thank you so much for joining me for a Chinwag today, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Definitely. Please do. Yeah.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.